Welcome along to the new episode of the Boostly podcast. Today, we are shining the spotlight on Price Labs and also on the Book Direct Blueprint, which is an up-and-coming book sort of collated by Mark Simpson and really talks about industry experts and leaders from all areas of hospitality and services that you need to know about as a host yourself. Today, we're really excited because we're actually joined by two of the members from Price Labs. We've got Anurag, who is the co-founder of Price Labs, and we've got Thibault, who is the head of, he's kind of the outreach and growth side of things. Is that right, Thibault?
Yeah, that's about right.
Awesome. So today we're going to dive straight into it and really bring those guys into the conversation. And let's find out more about Price Labs and why it's something that you as a host need to know about as well. So welcome along, Anurag.
Thank you so much, Liam.
And welcome along, Thibault.
Hello, Liam, and hello to the whole Boostly family.
Thank you so much for joining us. So let's dive straight in. And first question will go to you, Anurag, which is how did the book come about and why did you get involved in the Book Direct Blueprint?
Yeah, we generally I don't know if everybody knows about Price Labs or not, but we are more on the data and dynamic pricing side of things and not necessarily the Book Direct movement directly. What has happened over the years is a lot of our customers do have their own direct booking websites, and this question always kept coming up that, hey, I'm using you guys for dynamic pricing. It gets published through my PMS to these different OTAs, but how do I get those dynamic prices on my own website, which a lot of times they were hosted via some WordPress plugins or things like that, right? So this question kept coming up, and at one point, many years back, I reached out to Mark to say, like, hey, what's up here? Like, what do we need to do to get these rates? And he gave a very clear answer of like how this distribution is supposed to happen. But frankly, Mark and I started talking right about then about this, about other topics as well. There were other members of the Boostly community who were using Price Labs, so he had heard of us. I think earlier this year he reached out to say, hey, we're doing a follow-up book on Book Direct, and we want to get thoughts from multiple perspectives this time. And the thought was, can a big group of us, who each specialize in a certain part of this vacation rental ecosystem, come together and write a chapter on what they know about it. So that's where it started off, and we were happy to contribute, put down whatever little we know about Book Direct and a lot that we know about revenue management, and married them together and put our chapter out.
I mean, revenue management and particularly, well, whether it's Book Direct or not, is just so important. I know that I used to spend my days trying to choose the perfect rate, and I ended up on that typical host who ended up where I had two different pricing, one for winter, one for summer. And exactly, there's a part of, I'm lucky enough to see some of the your chapter beforehand, and you're absolutely right. That's exactly what most people do. It actually mentions it in there. And whether I had lots of bookings sometimes or no bookings at others, that was what the result was just by having that. What message would you say to people who are listening, who are in that similar boat?
You mean the boat of setting maybe 2 rates a year? My number one message to anybody who has never dabbled into revenue management or dynamic pricing is, if you have access to it, you probably have somewhere where all your bookings sit. Just go look at different months and see how each month has performed over the years. And you'll start to see a pattern. Like summer, it's not summer and winter. If you break it down, July and August are probably different, although they are both in a lot of places peak months. June is probably very different from August. And so like you can break it down by month, but then you break it down by day of week and you realize, okay, there is a weekend versus weekday pattern. There's so much going on that setting 2 rates all year is not the right thing. So like the least I tell anybody is look at seasons a little more granularly than just summer and winter, because there's also the shoulder season in between, where if you're not looking at it carefully, you're either priced too high or too low. Look at day of week patterns, And one of the real sort of no-brainers that we see in our industry is because the industry is so fragmented, there is a lot of supply out there, unless there's a big holiday coming up or things like that. Generally speaking, we see having rates lower a little bit as a date approaches and it's still not booked does give very good results. So a lot of these might seem like, hey, you don't need an algorithm to do it. But a lot of the benefit of the algorithm is within these three key areas. So if you can just tackle these three, which are all sitting in your own data, you'll be able to tell, okay, 80% of my bookings come outside of 20 days. And which means that if I'm still unbooked in the next 20 days, I need to start doing something to get those dates booked, for example. So where that number is different for everybody, depending on location, depending on what kind of clientele you have, and what kind of portfolio you have. Like business travel happens last minute versus beach travel, people plan months ahead. So the answer is different for anybody, but it's sitting in your data.
I mean, I'm a massive fan of Price Labs. I'm a host myself outside of Boostly, and I use Price Labs, which I'm proud to say. And it's one of the things which, until you try a service like Price Labs, you don't realize how much money you're leaving on the table, which has been so important and eye-opening for myself. Thibault, I'd love to come to you, and there'll be people listening to this and perhaps haven't heard of Price Labs, as crazy as it sounds. And I'd love to just get what is Price Labs as an elevator pitch, and then why should hosts really consider it?
Basically, Price Labs will help hosts increase their revenues, increase as well the occupancy, and save them time. What I mean by increases revenues is, for example, if there's in the future, there's a demand spike and you don't know about that, Price Lab will be able to detect this spike and increase your prices automatically and push them to, Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking, or your own website if you integrate it through a PMS, for example. And so that you don't miss out on this. For example, imagine there's there's a marathon, there's an event happening, and you don't know that not in your city, but nearby, and people will book in your city. You don't miss out on this. And same thing with the occupancy, right? I think it's exactly what Anurag was touching upon as well, in the sense that, for example, it's not just about pricing, it's also about, for example, minimum stay rules, right? You may have in the future two existing bookings that are matching your minimum stay rules, but maybe you could be a bit more flexible so that you can accept, let's say, 4-night booking between these two big bookings you have. But you need to automate that. I mean, it's if every time you want people to make it so that people who are on instant booking on Airbnb on Booking and they want to book, you should be able to say, you know what, if I do have two existing bookings, yeah, I'm okay for a shorter minimum stay, and maybe why not say, you know what, I'm okay with a shorter stay, but I'm going to bump the price by 10%, for example. That's just an example, but you can do that because you can basically put rules and what we call overrides in so that the pricing algorithm really obeys how you're running your business. And that's the thing I want to say about saving time as well, because if you have more than one listing, two listings, you have some ways to do things in bulk. So suddenly you can update, let's say you can put together, if you have if you're active in two markets, for example, what you can do, you can give it different pricing rules, different patterns to your listings in one market compared with other things. So again, more revenues, more occupancy, and probably saving time as well.
I mean, that's one of the things you touched on there is the time that it saves. How much time, sticking with yourself, Thibault, on this, how much time should hosts really be spending on tweaking and spending time looking at their rates and revenues? Is it something that they should be doing daily, weekly? What would your advice be around that?
I'm in same boat as you, Liam, in the sense that I was also a Price Labs user before joining the company. And I have 3 properties, right? So I would say in terms of time, it's very tricky because I remember before using all this, I would spend my Monday morning, was first thing in a week, Monday morning, go back to each and every calendar, make sure everything was okay, updated, If I had a booking, make sure the booking was there, and making sure maybe I need to lower my prices, as you know, and saying, oh, okay, next 30. I had this like crazy Excel sheet where basically I would enter my base price, my central price, and would say, okay, next, like a scaling stuff, like in next 30 days, I know like every day coming back to the day closer to us, I would discount my prices and I'll copy paste this and try to put this in the systems on Airbnb and the rest to be more aggressive to attract bookings. So that's, I got my Monday mornings back by using Price Labs. But what's interesting though, it's really important first that people, when they start using a tool like Price Lab or any tools like this, right? There's some kind of, I'm working on the onboarding of users at the moment, for example, right? And something super important that people set up the base price, the central price, like the everything on which the pricing will be evolving. It's super important to really spend time and say, okay, what's my central price I can have? And we have tools that can tell you, okay, what's happening in your market. That's what we see. We also give you advice on what your base price should be, right? So spending a lot of time on this and spending time also thinking, okay, maybe you also need to put some kind of minimum price and setting up some rules. I set my minimum stays. Maybe maybe far out in the future, a year from now, I want bigger stays. So only want 7 day night or 7 night stays, for example. So thinking first these rules carefully, and then you don't have to do it every day, right? Normally, you set it up and you start looking at things, how they're rolling for you, if you have a few properties. And then I would say you need to go back to them. It's not set up and forget either, right? You need to go back and say, okay, I set the base price first. How's that going for me, right? Is Price Lab now using my own data, my occupancy data, and using the market trends? Have they changed their prediction for the base price, for example? So I would say it's saving you time, but it's also making you think about other things to do. And you do need, for example, to get back, if you have like one property, just go back once a week to see how things are going. Is this how things are predicted? And again, making sure you are you really go and check whether things are really as you want. It's really important, because it's I think a mistake some people do. They think these are magical tools, right? There's a pricing algorithm, yeah, but to make it work, you have to first put your own rules on top of that and then check. I hope it makes sense.
That does absolutely make sense, especially from a host who's used it. It absolutely makes sense. So Anurag, coming back to you now on there, is there metrics that every host out there really should be measuring? Because I know you love numbers. I know you're the numbers guy. Is there metrics that each host should be measuring, and should they be measuring it from the first unit? You know, the guys who are doing it as side hustles, right up to when they run it as a business. And what is your thoughts around that? Should there be more hosts using these measurements, and is there specific sections of Price Labs that can help them with this?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if you have one property or 10 or 100 or 1,000. Everybody should be measuring in some ways what they're doing, right? There are two very common measures that I've seen, and the things that you measure will change as depending on the scale, right? If you have your own property, for example, you know very well exactly how many dates are available, what if you are blocking certain dates and things like that. If it's your second home, likely you're okay selling every night in the year on it, unless you're going and staying there. One of the very common metrics that everybody loves to look at is occupancy rate, which is very straightforward, right? Like, I mean, I have 31 days in July. I sold, say, 25 of them were booked, so my occupancy rate is 25 by 31 times 100, whatever it comes out to be. And those percentages help you get a sense of, okay, how well is my resource in some ways utilized. So like if you think about your home, in any given month, there are a fixed number of nights you can sell. Like, so travel industry is different than a lot of other industries, like manufactured goods in some ways. You can create more of something and then go sell it. So like if you sold a few things for too cheap, you make more of it and then realize there's a lot of demand, and you can have the chance to find the right price. Nights on your home are you can't create duplicates of that. Like once you have sold it to somebody, you've kind of sold it. So while occupancy is a great measure to get a sense of like, hey, if you're 0% occupied for like the upcoming month, that tells you a lot. That, hey, maybe my prices were too high. But if you are heavily occupied, if you're 80% occupied for the next month, it's harder to tell whether it's a great thing or not, because maybe you're 80% booked because your price was too cheap. A lot of demand was still there to come, and you got sold early. What helps in such cases is a metric. Revenue as a metric when you have one property is perfectly fine to use, because revenue is also in many ways what should matter to every vacation rental owner, to say, okay, how much money am I making out of this? It doesn't matter if I'm 80% occupied or if I'm 40% occupied. If I made enough to cover whatever expenses I have and mortgaged, and enough for me to live by, then I'm fine with it, right? Once you get to a larger scale and when you're managing somebody else's properties, that's when you get into, okay, is revenue the right number? Because maybe last year we made $20,000 on these, or pounds on these 10 homes in this month, and this year we made double of that. But maybe the number of homes you were managing has increased. Last year you were managing 20, and this year you're managing 30. So you have to think of a few more involved metrics. One of them is called RevPAR. In essentially saying, don't look at total revenue, but look at revenue per unit per night, or things like that. For somebody who has one property, just looking at revenue and occupancy is good enough. Like those two will tell you enough.
I love that you've mentioned the story of if all the time we hear hosts who say, "Hey, I'm 100% occupied," and my instant reaction is, "You're too cheap."
Yeah.
You're not
Exactly.
charging enough. Yeah. And it's sometimes worn as a badge of honor, whereas actually if you're that 80-90% occupied, potentially you're selling it at the right level, again depending on the product. But
on that one, very quickly, we see some folks who sign up with us where they are used to their entire next year's calendar being 80% full at the beginning of like any time. Like if they join today, we see that, okay, 80% of the future year's nights are already booked. And we look at the market data and we're like, that is not normal, because in your market, like half the bookings come within the last 3 months. So you must be selling very cheap if, like, even more than 3 months out, you're that booked. So yeah, if anybody who says, say, I'm 100% booked all the time is either doing it really well, like Thibault said, selling out for a high price far out and then figuring out how to fill the gaps and things like that, or potentially is selling too cheap, and very frequently it's the latter. Like I don't think anybody has mastered revenue management to the point of saying, yeah, I'm 100% booked and I'm making as much as I could.
Yeah, it's always more to discover, isn't there? And
there is always, yeah.
The other metric that you mentioned there, which I didn't really know about till I got to about 7-8 properties, was RevPAR. It was an eye opener for me, because I used to think, well, am I comparing total revenue? Am I comparing occupancy? But RevPAR solves that problem, where I can compare units to a degree, against each other. So definitely one to check out for anyone listening is RevPAR.
And to the other question, Liam, we provide dynamic pricing, but we also we call it portfolio analytics, but it's essentially a BI tool. So if you connect your property to Price Labs, even if you don't want to use dynamic pricing, the BI tool is free. So you can go and look at those kinds of metrics for your own portfolio, look at seasonal trends within our product without using dynamic pricing if you want to.
That's really cool. So Thibault, coming back to yourself, the one thing that you probably get to talk to a lot of hosts, and the one thing that I sometimes hear people worried about for dynamic pricing, or some of the worries and the objections, some of them say, it costs, which of course it does. I'd love to find out what your reply would be to the people who are worried about the cost of the software, but then also I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm worried that all of a sudden my rates are going to go up too high, and they're worried about the perception of what their guests will feel like if if they've stayed with them before. What would be your advice to those hosts?
Sure. These are great questions indeed. And first, I will talk of the cost of opportunity of not using the tool, right? For example, of course, we all love book direct, and with my own properties, I want as many bookings as possible, but I'm also on Airbnb, right? And if you're listing your place on Airbnb right now, if you start listing with them, by default, they have their smart pricing turned on. So many people don't realize that, but they are using, or Airbnb is making them use, their own dynamic pricing tool, which is called smart pricing, right? And what's interesting is that if you think about the goal of this tool, the goal of this tool in Airbnb is to make sure there's a lot of bookings happening, right? Because Airbnb is taking commission on that. So the goal of this dynamic tool basically is to make sure the price is not too high, is high enough so you get bookings and Airbnb is going good revenues because they get the host fee, but it's not too high that people will not be booking, right? So it does mean that probably the prices are lower. It would be if it was not determined by Airbnb's own interest here. So there's a cost opportunity, just as I said, if you're just not using, for example, any tool, we talked about, how you're missing out on demand spikes, but even if you're just using Airbnb's own tool, there's probably a cost opportunity here too. So that's number one. Number two, what's interesting with Price Labs actually, and again, that's why I was a client with a customer with them, is that the structure of the cost is actually it's actually the best value for money in the industry, in the sense that it's just it starts, I think, around $19 if you have one listing, for example, and it goes down if you more listings you add. But it does mean that it's a flat fee, right? It's not like the more bookings you get, the more money we're making, right? If you're successful, we're very happy. It's still the same price, not taking more. So that's also something to realize here. It's a bit different, right? It's not like, again, a booking platform that would take a cut every time you have a booking. No, we're a flat fee. You're successful, good for you. That's more money for you. I think you had another question around the, another fear that users would have. What was it again?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other fear that users sometimes have is that they're worried that the prices will be too high. The perception from their previous guests that may worry them.
I think it's a great question, right? It's a great question. So again, there's several things to have in mind here. First, if you want to, you can always set up a maximum price. If you want to, right? There's in Price Labs. It's very easy. You see your listing, you're going to see this base price, you can see minimum price. I would tell you always set up a minimum price, right? Never know, why not? But if you really want to, consider a maximum price. If you really you're afraid of stuff, even to get started to see how it goes, right? But I would not encourage to do that because you may miss out again in these demand spikes, right? Now, for your former guests, you could imagine maybe you have, a special pricing for them in the sense that maybe you tell them to use, you have a special grade, the special pricing you send them by email and let them know about this, right? But that's where you have to think about several things here. For example, are you in a market where people come back the following year, right? If not, for example, I have a property in Bali. It's a once lifetime destination. People who saw a price last year will not be the same people who see a price next year. So I don't have the issue, right? Second, if people are very loyal to me, it's great. So maybe we have a special pricing. And you know what? If they book direct, you can tell me by email and they book, they have this special price. Why not? I communicate to them. And then I would block those dates in my PMS, for example, or in my tool. And then that automatically those days will be blocked off in Price Labs. And no issue for them, right? So it really depends here. But there's indeed, in the end, it's also your interest, right, as a host to make the most money as possible, because also what you can do in the end, it can also maybe at times be lower than you used to be, for example, in the coming next 2 weeks, you don't have any bookings. Maybe the tool is going to tell you, hey, you have to lower your price because you really last minute, you're always a bit too high. In this case, if you have people who booked with you last year and rebook now last minute, they will have a lower price. So it's also, this is what, I would say the rules of like the demand and supply are. So of course you have to take care of your past guests, make sure that whether is it really important in your market. If you have a loyalty program, use your loyalty program with Book Direct, very important. But as well, don't miss out on spikes, and prices can go up and also can go down, right?
I completely agree with you with like you say, just making sure you're making the most of those high peaks is just so important, because as Anurag said, the amount of stock that you have, you don't get that time back. You don't get those nights back.
And I understand. I mean, whenever we do, somebody in my team called Ishani, she does customer testimonials, right? And a lot of time we hear people saying how uncomfortable they were or unsure they were when it's so how high the price could go. And I get that, right? It's like, you're like, really? And sometimes, yep, really. And it's like, you don't believe, and then you're like, oh my God, what did I do all these years not thinking about this? For example, I know on another island we have a property with a big sailing regatta. The whole island, usually everybody's coordinated. The end season, the high season ends on the same day for everybody on the island. It's probably like this in some markets, right? But this sailing regatta happens a week later. So a lot of demand for that, but everybody lowers their price. That's crazy. Thanks to PriceLab, I was being able to, improve my pricing there and just like doubling my revenues for that week, which just makes sense. So I'm not betraying anyone. It's just like this, people can book elsewhere, right? If they want to.
One thing that we always say in Boostly is get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's how you know you're growing as a host and as a person in general. And one of the things that it done for me is it reset the kind of level that I thought the price should be for using PriceLabs. And also with the extra revenue, I could put that back into guest experience. So we bought like a drinks fridge for one of them. We improved our guest books and things like that. So that's the other thing from a host point of view, is that you can then reinvest in your unit and actually improve the experience for your guests, because at the end of the day, if cash flow is king, and if you've not got enough cash flow to do the things you want to do to keep that guest experience where you want to, then it's a downward spiral at that stage, which is where having price revenue management really comes in.
Something sorry to interject, something I heard on those lines actually from a customer is they saw something similar where it was an event they didn't know about and the prices went up like 2 or 3 times and somebody booked it, and then they were worried that what do we do? They might be disappointed because it's a nice 2-bedroom, but is it worth 3x the price I usually sell at? And somebody else in their community suggested that go all out on put a nice bottle of wine out, get flowers ordered, do whatever you want. Like if you made 400 extra bucks and you're worried about what would the guests say, put $100 in and reinvest it back in their stay, like nothing else, and then see what happens. And of course, they got a glowing review about how good the hospitality was and everything else, right? So you can do some things like this as well when you get those one-off bookings where something big is happening and you end up charging more. Put it back right in that stay.
So adding value to it is absolutely key. So Anurag, sticking with yourself, I'd love to know a little bit more about the history of PriceLabs. Obviously,
right.
If you can give us just a brief overview of how PriceLabs came around, and also was there a wow moment where you went, you know what, this is something which we're going to do. This is what I want to solve, this problem in the hospitality industry.
Yeah. So we started PriceLabs in 2014, and early 2014, I think it was Jan or Feb. My co-founder Richie was studying at Northwestern University in Chicago, and I used to work in Chicago for United Airlines, doing the same pricing and revenue management algorithms there. And we had known each other for about 10 years at that point. We worked together in undergrad. So for the summer, he was planning on listing his spare bedroom, his roommate's spare bedroom on Airbnb. And as he was going through the process, he's like, hey, Airbnb does it doesn't give any indication. So this is 2014. Airbnb didn't have smart pricing and things like that. So it's like it's travel, it's fixed resources. Like I only have 3 months of this room to sell. I want to make sure I'm selling it at the right price. Like how do I do this? And he and I started talking. He's like, hey, if airlines can do it, why shouldn't it exist in short-term rentals, right?
Mhm.
And we're like, okay, that argument makes sense. It should exist. Like, and then we started off on like, how do we make this happen? The biggest challenge at that point was like airlines, hotels, they all have like troves of their own data. And a lot of Airbnb hosts, if you have one property, or a lot of like, if you are not even on, like at that time, Airbnb wasn't as big. Like if you're a vacation rental owner with one property, that is not enough data for anybody to be able to say, hey, something big is happening on like September 15th. Let's increase prices. Because if you have one property, it's either booked or not booked. Once it's booked, you can't do anything. And if it's not booked, how do you tell there is there's a high demand, right? So we started then, we found our third co-founder who was an engineer, thankfully, to start gathering all of this data, to start scraping different OTAs to say, hey, what's available, what's selling at what price. And then we built out sort of a system to say, okay, when a lot of things are selling fast, we increase prices. When they are not, we decrease prices. And that was sort of the first version of it. We put it out, learned a lot from the feedback we got from folks in Chicago who tried it. In 2016, we sort of did a relaunch. By then, we had figured out a lot of things like seasonality is important in this industry, like day of week adjustments are important, events and holidays are, and booking window, like how far out it is important. So like by then we had figured out a lot of these things and we poured it all into our algorithm. But even then it was just Airbnb at that point. And this is again feedback we kept getting from people to say like, hey, Airbnb is a slice of the industry. It is not the industry. If you want to do something in this industry on pricing, you need to hook up with property management systems. And at that time, we had no clue what these meant. So we started talking to a few like customers who were using us to see recommendations and then plug them into their property management system, told us, hey, just integrate with my property management system. And customers made those introductions for us. Started off there, been on a journey to figure out what this industry is about. I think now we integrate with about 90 property management systems, and there are so many more that we don't integrate with. It's a vast, vast industry. So yeah, it's been like that constant figuring out how does this work? Like first figuring out how to get data, then figuring out what to do with the data, then figuring out how do we get the price recommendations into the property management systems. Like all of this has been sort of a lot of small aha moments along the way, but it's been fun. Yeah.
I love that. I love the fact that you saw, you know, in another industry and go, hey, why doesn't that already exist? And then you've gone out and created it. How does it feel helping so many people? You know, it must. So then, how many active, I guess, users are there of Price Labs, and how does it feel helping so many people?
Yeah, so we have about 20,000 customers, and amongst all of them, there are about 160,000 properties that use Price Labs. Feels great. Feels also like very. We want to make sure we are doing everything we can to keep improving the product. So like it's also joy and responsibility hand in hand in some ways. So yeah, it generally feels good.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, I really get a sense of really where Price Labs has come from and the you know, sort of the aha moments, like you say, across the way. Thibault, I'd love to know a little bit more about how you came to be part of Price Labs, and of course, you've got your awesome sort of new site, the Rental Scale Up, as well, haven't you? So I'd love to know more about yourself for the audience.
Yeah, excited. I mean, excited. I'm excited and exactly. Sorry, it's a bit. I'm under the weather today, so I'm trying to find my words.
Oh, bless you. Don't worry.
Sorry about that.
Thank you for joining us.
No, it's okay. Our 2-year-old managed to get me sick after trying for a whole week. The coughing worked.
Do that.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, I had been blogging about the industry for a while. First under the name Rentalpreneurs, and then under Rental Scale Up, and And so rental scale up really started growing 2 years ago, and talking about what the big players are doing in the industry, like Airbnb, Booking, or sharing data about what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe, and talking about new players, like Boostly, for example, or any kind of new tech really that people should know about. So we have a weekly newsletter that's free. It's out every Wednesday, and basically we help people understand what's happening in the industry, and we have a voice. So we try to just say, okay, that's what's happening. And so quite a few times we break news actually. Okay, that's what's happening. That's what we think it means for you guys. And that's what we think you should be doing. So we try to not just be like reporting, but also maybe try to give advice, because obviously, as we host ourselves, we say, try to make sense of stuff. Mm-hmm. And for some reason still unknown to me, Richie, Anurag, and Sana, the co-founders of PriceLab, liked rental scale up. So we joined the rentals. We joined the PriceLab family in August 2022. I think what's really good here is that basically it enables me, for example, rental scale up, to have access to all the market dashboards. So market dashboard is a product in PriceLabs where basically you can enter an address and find all kind of like data around the market, number of listings, and you can divide up by, I want to see only data for 2-bedroom places and data trends, booking pace, kind of things like this. So I can have this, for example, where I'm talking, imagine I want to write an article about France. So I want to write an article about a market somewhere. Suddenly I have access to real data and real trends thanks to PriceLabs, because they get that data from different sources, from Airbnb, Verbo, their own sources. So it's unbelievable for me for the content, right? And for PriceLab also, it means that, for example, PriceLab now is the sponsor of every show we're doing or every content we have, right? It's also a way really to help people again understand what PriceLab is about. And it's good for people who have like 1-2 properties, as well people who have like thousands of properties, right? They're going to use the tool differently, but in the end, the algorithm at the heart of it is the same. That's how it plays out, rental scale up and PriceLabs.
I love this, story, and certainly we'll check you out, and I'm sure people listening are going to come and check you out as well. The data is just so important, isn't it? And one of the features that I absolutely love is the fact that as a host, you may not know where your base price can be, so you can use the sort of the selection, the tool, where you can select your number of bedrooms, you can select whether it's high end, mid, sort of budget, and it'll give you an idea of base price. And like you say, you can dive into the analytics of it as well. So
yeah, what's also very important, Liam, for hosts like us, we always want to know, okay, I know what's happening to me, but am I the only one? Am I crazy? What's happening in the market, right? And suddenly you get this data. You can even like fine tune stuff, and you can select like, some properties that you all want to have an eye on and see how they're doing, or have them in part of a set on which you're going to compare your own performance against theirs. So it's really, really useful. Again, in Bali, I have a property that's very unique, but I know a few places that are somewhat comparable. So it really enables me to also fine tune on what amount properties compare against and see that in PriceLab. So I find it very, very, very powerful.
One of the things that we love to do is, there's so much more we could talk about. I'd love to dive in, like the integration. There's so much, but as we get towards the end of these, we love to just do a couple of quick fire questions, just find out a little bit more about you. And sticking with yourself, Thibault, you mentioned your properties in Bali, did you say?
Correct.
Yeah, and where is? So question number one is where is your favorite holiday destination?
So I have one property in Bali and the other in the Caribbean, because I actually lived for quite a few years in the French Caribbean. So my favorite destination is going to be that island in the Caribbean. Yeah.
Nice. I like that. Anurag, what is your favorite or the most recent, either of those, piece of tech that you bought? So tech or app or tool?
Let me think about it. So one, I'm wearing these. That's definitely one. But I used to have so much trouble with webinars like this or video calls, where I would be constantly holding my like the string mic next to my face so that I could be heard. I bought this webcam that sits on top of my monitor. That the reason for that purchase was more because I have a laptop and people were always looking the side of my face, and I got this. And as a surprise, it also has a built-in mic, which works like 10 times better than anything else I had used before.
Nice.
And it's like a $20 camera with a built-in mic. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, like my last 8 months have been tremendous because of that. I don't know if you wanted vacation rental tech or tech.
No. Any tech at all. What are the headphones? I always love to find out what are the headphones that you're using as well.
They are Samsung Galaxy Buds.
Nice. It's I just love finding out about tech and that sort of thing. So sticking with yourself, Anurag, the next question, quickfire, is what is your favorite food?
Favorite food? There's hard to name one, but I generally love Chinese food a lot. And I'm saying I love Indian food and eat that all day, but Chinese food is what I don't get to eat every day. So like if I have to go out or order in Chinese food.
Nice. And Thibault, coming back to yourself, what is a compliment that you can remember receiving, or the best compliment that you've received?
I like what you write. I must say, it's like, because you write this newsletter, this content, right, and you send it out to the world, and you have no idea. It's scary. Like, is it relevant? Do I make sense? Will people get it? And then you go to a conference. For example, I was at VRM in the US a few weeks ago on a Price Labs booth, and people see my name like, oh, that's who you are. I love what you write. I'm like, wow, thanks, because it does validate in a way what you've been doing, which is, again, it is scary, because in the end you want to help people and you create this content, but the feedback loop is, it can't be, there's nothing better than like people telling you like, yes, that's very helpful. Thank you. Yep.
I love that. And we always end with the same question. So we'll come to you first, Anurag. What is one mantra or motto that you like to live by?
So it's a quote by, I don't know if it's actually by him, but in popular media, it's attributed to Albert Einstein. And it says, make everything as simple as it can be, but no simpler. And the thought is essentially that when you think about solving a problem, you can create a very complicated solution to it and try to attack it that way. But if you truly try to get to the bottom of like, hey, what's the problem? There's often a simple solution potentially waiting that you should try to get to. And the second part says, but not any simpler, because sometimes it's not a simple solution, and you shouldn't choose the incorrect simpler solution just because it's simpler. So that's kind of, in many ways, like we try to do that at Price Labs, especially on the data science team, to say, okay, when we want to predict something, there's you can throw the kitchen sink at it, but then can we do it in a simpler way that's a lot more understandable and gives as good results? And we would pick the simpler any day.
It makes sense. I like that. And Thibault, same question to yourself. What mantra or motto do you live by?
All right. I think I would say it's, let me pronounce it right. So independence is not a dogma, it's a result. And it's something I came across actually this year, because it was a difficult year, and I talked with a coach actually about, a few things, and I realized that a lot of the decision I was making was like, oh, because I want to be independent, or I thought that being independent, for example, meant a few things, like, if you have your own business, for example, or if you want to work remotely, or all kind of things. Like, being independent for me meant a few things. That's what it is. It was like a very strict definition. And actually, by following this very strict definition, I would end up being completely not independent. I would be depending on other things. So that's when talking with this coach is like, no, you are independent. That's that would be a result. That would not be, it's like, no, it's not a few things you're doing, it's the result in the end you should be doing. So it's like focus more on the end result. And if some things are not conducive to getting to that result, change them. So yeah, it was interesting for me.
That definitely resonates with me. There's a chap called Alex Harmozy who I follow, and that reminds me of some advice that I've seen from him, which is not looking, like you say, for the result, but look towards what degree does it move you closer towards that goal. You know, like imagine building a bridge across a ravine. Is it an extra brick in that ravine that you don't want the result instantly because that's unlikely to happen? So, but does it bring you closer to it? And we should measure by degrees like that. So awesome. So in terms of for everybody listening, we should mention just before we go that the book is going to be out December 2022. So depending on when you listen to this, you need to go and check out the book Direct Blueprint. And you can do so by going to boostly.co.uk/blueprint. And depending on when you're listening, you can either pre-register for the book or you can actually make the purchase there. And so thank you so much for joining me tonight, Anurag and Thibault. That's superb to speak to you and really to find out about Price Labs. I've learned lots, and I'm sure everybody else has as well. Is there any questions that I've missed or any final thoughts before we go? If we come to you first, Anurag.
Not really, but to reiterate what you said, Liam, the book is out in December, and a lot of us have put in a significant amount of effort in writing it and bringing in very varied perspectives. So would love to hear feedback. Similar to Thibault said, we put in all this effort. Was it useful? Like, we would love to know to see that feedback. But yeah, if there are any questions that we couldn't answer, or you had, or anybody else had that they want answered, feel free to reach out to us. Email is usually the best way. I'm at anurag@pricelabs.co. And if not me, you can always go to our website. There's a chat button and leave your question there, and we'll get back to it as well.
Awesome. And we should mention as well the tips that you share in your chapter. I mean, first of all, there's there's a link at the end of the chapter to find out more as well, but there's very actionable advice, and certainly I'll leave it as a cliffhanger for people listening, but you really changed the way I think about OTAs and direct bookings in terms of how I cost things up, and it's such an important bit of information in there. Thibault, how can the listeners get in touch with you? And is there any final thoughts before we go?
Sure thing. Again, first, thanks for having us. And rentalscaleup.com is where the website is, and you can contact me there. Obviously, I also have an address at Price Labs, but it's I would have to spell out my first name and last name, and it's going to be a torture for people listening. It's too complicated. Just go to basically rentalscaleup.com and contact. I would be there. I could either contact me for Price Labs or for Rental Scale. I'd be happy to answer that. And also something I want to mention, indeed, that there's a free trial. People can try us out for at least 30 days. So just to give an idea of how things would be. And you can even like try out, put your listing and use your own data to see how prices would be without having to push those prices to Airbnb or to Booking, to anything. So you can really do this in private box. It's safe, but you can see things for yourself. I think it's very, very important as well. I think that's the best tip I can give for people who are, regardless of the tools, right? Want to make a decision, want to make a big decision like this. Should I be try starting using this? Put a link to one of your listings, check out the price predictions for yourself, tweak things a bit. And you don't have to already push the prices, just learn by doing. And if you're comfortable, do it, or reach out to us if you have doubts.
I love that. It's about taking action, isn't it? And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people off the back of this podcast and the book who come to you guys because, hey, it's helped me, and it's one of the few things which I say it's a no-brainer. It really is something which hosts should get involved with. So thank you very much, guys. Been an absolute pleasure having you on. Apologies, we've run slightly over time. It's been a slightly longer one than we planned, but really appreciate your time. And I also appreciate the guests and the people listening to this podcast. I know there's lots of places you can put your attention. I really appreciate you spending it here on the Boostly podcast. So that's it from us. Thank you very much, and goodbye. We'll see you on the next one.
Having a blast, gonna get it on the Boostly podcast. Boostly like Bruce Lee, cause it's so hard and the T is loose leaf. Making up those rhymes, don't write it, just do it loosely.